up, everyone? It's your boy Soju from the Straight Chillin' Podcast, and today I'm back with another video game review, this time for Little Nightmares 2. So starting off, I generally would recommend that you play through this game, especially if you enjoyed playing through the first Little Nightmares. The gameplay here is pretty similar with a few new tweaks. If you've never played through the first Little Nightmares before, I think you can go ahead and jump right into this one. It's not too hard to pick up. Also, if you just generally enjoy side-scroller horror puzzle games, I think you'll enjoy this as well. But before I get too far into it, let's go ahead and drop that spoiler warning.
Spoiler warning.
So starting off with the positives of Little Nightmares 2, I really enjoyed the look and aesthetic of this game. It's very consistent with the first one. I really like that cartoony style. It reminds me of things like Coraline, where it's kind of like this childlike horror, but they really do a good job in utilizing that style and creating some really great horror stuff. And that was another one of my favorites. I love the horror elements in this game. I think the hospital level was the one that stood out the most to me, to being kind of the most horrific, or the one that generated the most genuine tension. But there was a lot of solid horror moments in this game. I really liked also the kind of Lovecraftian elements that came with the ending of this game. That was something that the first one didn't really include a whole lot of, and so it's kind of cool to see it in this game. It added to the lore a little bit and made it a little bit more intriguing and interesting. The music is, again, consistently good, just like the first game. It's got some new stuff in it, and it's just really kind of creepy, atmospheric, again, almost childlike in its kind of design. But I do really enjoy those things coming together, where it feels like a game that you would almost want to play as a kid, but almost just a little too much horror. Or I don't know if I would let kids actually play this, but it's got that feel to it that, I don't know, it really works in its own kind of skin, I guess. I like the new interactive game styles that they introduced into this game. So they're not completely new, but the kind of co-op with the AI, it's something we did see in the DLC from the first Little Nightmares. But I liked how they brought it back. I liked how they made some changes in it. There are some new kind of combat elements that go along with it, but adding that element in where you have to work with this AI, sometimes protect it, but not all of the time. I'm glad that they didn't make that the entire gameplay, so I like the variety that this one kind of offers. And I like that they brought back 6 and added more to the lore of the first game, even though I think this is technically a prequel to the story. I liked that they brought that character back and added more depth to her, and that we got to interact with her again and kind of get a taste of what she's like when she's like not the protagonist, when she's not the one you're controlling. And so I thought that that was a really cool style, and the new design of the new character, it's not as distinct from an aesthetic standpoint. Like that yellow raincoat was so iconic in the first game, especially against the very dark colors. But I do like the idea with the bag on his head, and then you can change out the hats as a collectible. Like that was a cool touch. I like the design on the new character and kind of his backstory and lore, and they did a good job kind of fleshing this world out a little bit more in this new setting. Now, some of the negatives. This game is pretty consistent with the first game as far as the look and aesthetic and the music, and those are all positive things. Unfortunately, it carries over a lot of the negatives I had with Little Nightmares, the first one, and that's consistent mechanics, like the problems with them. I feel like a lot of the challenge from this game comes not necessarily from it actually being challenging, but from poor mechanics. Things like depth. It feels like an early style 3D game like that you would see on PlayStation or N64 sometimes, where you'll die just because you're slightly off from jumping to a rope, or it's not consistent with like walking on a platform. Like sometimes it kind of guides you and you don't have to be ultra precise, and then sometimes it's just completely unforgiving if you are just slightly angled off of the platform, like you fall and you die. Same thing with, you know, jumping onto ropes that are kind of out in the air space where you have to line it up perfectly, and that was just really tedious. Something I had a problem with the first game, and it's unfortunate to see that that's not something that they could fix in this one. And also too, the new kind of attack element that's in this game that wasn't necessarily in the first one, where you actually sometimes can pick up weapons like hatchets and bats and things sometimes. I remember them specifically a lot in the school level, where there are these dolls and you have to smash them. The timing of that is just not super smooth, and it's so unforgiving, to the point where I died so many times in that level. Even though I knew what to do, just the timing didn't feel consistent with how you were supposed to smash these dolls and the way they jumped at you, and like how long it took for you to swing your weapon. So it ultimately just became kind of tedious and definitely took away from my enjoyment of the game. It's not super fresh, honestly, for a game that's been in development for several years and came out, and I paid $30 for it on the Xbox store. It's didn't necessarily feel worth that. It's pretty short, and it ultimately feels a lot like the first game. It doesn't have a whole lot of distinct elements or designs in it, and I thought a lot of the designs for like the bosses were worse than the first one, and in a sense kind of took a lot of beats from the first one too. There were times I would run through an area and the design of the puzzles or the layout felt almost ripped from the first game. Like I almost like instinctively knew where to go without ever having played this game, because it felt so familiar to the first game. And things like the hunter, it was a cool level being out and crawling in the mud and being out in the wilderness where you're used to being like on the ship, but I didn't think his design was particularly interesting. The teacher also kind of fell flat for me as well. Again, I did really like the hospital designs. Those were super creepy, but ultimately I felt like the bosses in this one weren't as distinct as the first game, so that was kind of fell a little flat for me. I didn't like the city as much as the boat. Like that's kind of a minor thing, but when you're coming back on a game like this with Little Nightmares that was so popular and so distinct, I respect that they wanted to go to a new setting. I think that that was a smart move. They should have done that. It just had so little impact for what I feel like they should have like followed up with. I feel like it should have been bigger or more distinct in some way, and it felt less in almost every single way. And as much as I like how they built out the story in this game, I didn't feel like they answered a lot of questions from the first game. The first game was very intriguing, and making this kind of a prequel, I assumed that you would get kind of more answers or more clues at least to some of the things that we saw in the first game, and I didn't really feel that a whole lot, a little bit. But because nobody really speaks in this game, I felt like they needed to show us more than they did, and that also kind of fell a little flat for me. So those are kind of my big major positives and negatives. Let's go ahead and hop into the final score.
Overall, I'm going to give this game a 3 out of 5. I did enjoy playing through it, and it's pretty consistent with the first game. However, there's not enough new here to make this game really feel fresh. If you've played through Little Nightmares 2 before, let me know what you think in the comments below. Make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons to get some weekly horror content from the Straight Chillin' podcast. And until next time, don't forget to keep chillin'.